It started with a single HOA notice taped to a front door, but by the end of the week, the entire neighborhood was on edge. Mail went missing, packages were held for approval, and one resident claimed she had the authority to decide who deserved access to the community mailbox. What began as a minor inconvenience quickly turned into fines, threats, and silent intimidation that left neighbors afraid to check their own mail. Everyone assumed it would blow over until one homeowner realized this wasn't about rules at all. It was about power. And once that realization hit, the dispute was already beyond control. The neighborhood had always felt predictable in the best possible way. The streets were quiet, the houses neatly spaced, and the routines almost comforting. Trash days came and went without arguments. Lawns stayed trimmed. Packages arrived on time. For the residents of Willow Creek Estates, life followed an unspoken rhythm that made the HOA feel more like background noise than a real presence. The homeowner at the center of this story fits seamlessly into that rhythm. He worked from home, kept to himself, and followed the rules not out of fear, but convenience. HOA emails were skimmed, dues were paid automatically, and complaints were something that happened to other people. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, but it was stable, and stability was all he wanted. Like many modern households, deliveries played a quiet but important role in daily life. Work equipment, household items, and the occasional personal purchase all passed through the same place every neighbor relied on, the shared community mailbox. It sat at the corner of the street, plain and unremarkable, serving dozens of homes without incident for years. No one questioned it. No one needed to. What made Willow Creek feel especially secure was the sense that everyone knew their place. Most neighbors exchanged polite waves but stayed out of each other's business. That balance worked until someone decided that order wasn't enough. Control was better. One house sat closer to the mailbox than all the others, and its occupant had always paid closer attention to neighborhood details. She noticed small things most people ignored: parking alignment, trash can placement, how long someone lingered outside. Over time, her watchfulness shifted from observation to involvement. What had once felt like concern slowly began to feel like supervision. At first, it showed up in harmless ways. Extra notes on the bulletin board. Friendly reminders passed along through HOA channels. Nothing alarming, nothing confrontational. But there was an edge to it, an unspoken suggestion that some residents were doing things wrong, even if no one could quite explain how. The first real change didn't arrive with an argument or a meeting. It arrived quietly, in the form of inconvenience. A delivery that took longer than expected. A package marked as delivered but not immediately found. A growing sense that something routine had become unpredictable. The HOA, usually slow and detached, suddenly seemed more alert. Emails grew firmer in tone. Warnings referenced community property and shared responsibilities, though no specific rule changes were announced. The language was vague, but the pressure was clear. Something about the mailbox had shifted, and not everyone was comfortable asking why. For the first time since moving into Willow Creek Estates, residents felt uncertain about a space that had always belonged to everyone. Checking the mail no longer felt automatic. It felt observed. Regulated. Slightly risky. What no one realized yet was that this quiet disruption was only the beginning. A simple routine had become a point of control, and the neighborhood was about to learn how quickly small authority, when unchecked, could turn into something far more personal and far more destructive. What began as a mild inconvenience slowly turned into a daily source of tension that no one in Willow Creek Estates could ignore. The mailbox, once an invisible part of the neighborhood's routine, had become the center of quiet anxiety. People approached it more cautiously now, scanning the area first, timing their visits, sometimes turning back altogether. Something ordinary had been transformed into a test of compliance. The HOA's involvement escalated subtly at first. Emails arrived with neutral subject lines but sharper language inside. Residents were reminded about shared assets, oversight authority, and the importance of respecting designated management. No one remembered voting on any new rule, yet the tone suggested the matter was settled. Questions went unanswered. Clarifications were deferred. The message was clear without being explicit: don't push back. Then the fines started. They weren't dramatic at first, small amounts attached to vague violations. Unauthorized access. Failure to comply with posted guidance. Interference with community property. The wording was intentionally broad, leaving residents unsure of what they had done wrong or how to avoid repeating it. The lack of clarity created fear, and fear did the work that enforcement couldn't. The main homeowner felt it personally when a second package vanished. This one mattered more. It was time-sensitive, work-related, and its absence caused immediate problems. When he followed up, the response was frustratingly indirect. The delivery had arrived. The mailbox had been secured. Any further questions, he was told, should be directed to the HOA. That was when the sense of helplessness set in. Neighbors began sharing stories quietly, usually in passing or through brief, cautious messages. Medication delayed. Legal documents misplaced. Important notices received days late. Everyone had a version of the same experience, yet no one wanted to be the first to complain publicly. The fines were real. The warnings were documented. And the HOA, once distant and slow, now seemed unusually aligned with one specific interpretation of the rules. Physical changes followed. A temporary structure appeared near the mailbox, justified as a security measure. Then signage. Then a printed schedule outlining acceptable access times. None of it was formally announced. None of it appeared in the HOA handbook. But it existed, and ignoring it came with consequences. The homeowner noticed how quickly behavior changed around him. Confident neighbors became cautious. Friendly waves turned into knowing glances. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when certain houses were nearby. The community wasn't united, it was shrinking inward, each resident trying to stay invisible. The HOA emails intensified. Notices began referencing repeat violations. Fines doubled. Payment deadlines shortened. Appeals were acknowledged but never resolved. The system felt deliberately exhausting, designed to wear people down rather than resolve anything. Every response led to another form, another delay, another warning about non-compliance escalation. The homeowner tried to follow the rules as best he could, but the rules kept changing. What was acceptable one week became a violation the next. Access windows shifted. Instructions contradicted earlier guidance. It became impossible to know whether checking the mail would result in relief or another notice taped to the door. Frustration turned into determination. Late nights were spent reading HOA bylaws, archived emails, and community documents that most residents never bothered to open. Buried in dense language were contradictions the HOA never addressed. Authority assumed but not clearly granted. Responsibilities claimed but not formally assigned. The deeper the homeowner looked, the clearer it became that the enforcement didn't rest on solid ground, it relied on intimidation and ambiguity. At the same time, pressure from the HOA increased. A formal letter arrived warning of continued disregard for community management procedures. It referenced potential legal action without specifying the basis. The threat alone was enough to unsettle anyone unfamiliar with HOA tactics. It was designed to sound final, absolute, and expensive. Yet something didn't add up. The mailbox itself existed in a strange gray area. The HOA treated it as community property, but the documentation didn't support that claim. Installation records, maintenance responsibility, and regulatory language all pointed elsewhere. This wasn't just an HOA issue, it crossed into territory governed by outside authorities. The realization changed everything. Instead of pushing back publicly, the homeowner shifted strategies. He stopped reacting emotionally. He documented everything. Dates. Notices. Photos. Emails. Changes to signage. Inconsistencies. What had felt overwhelming now felt like evidence. Meanwhile, the situation in the neighborhood reached a boiling point. One morning, multiple residents found identical violation notices waiting for them. The same wording. The same fine. The same accusation of unauthorized access. It was no longer personal, it was systematic. The message was unmistakable: comply, or everyone pays. That mass notice broke the silence. People who had avoided confrontation now felt targeted regardless of their behavior. Compliance no longer guaranteed safety. The fear that had kept everyone quiet suddenly worked in the opposite direction. Frustration turned outward. Questions circulated. Private messages turned into group conversations. Patterns emerged. And at the center of every pattern was the same point of control. The HOA tried to regain dominance quickly. A sudden community update reaffirmed management authority and warned against misinformation. It encouraged residents to trust the process and reminded them that resistance could lead to further penalties. The tone was firm, bordering on threatening. Instead of restoring order, it confirmed suspicion. The homeowner took the final step quietly, without announcement or confrontation. He reached beyond the HOA, beyond the neighborhood, and into a system that didn't respond to intimidation or internal politics. He presented documentation, timelines, and a clear explanation of how routine access had been restricted without legal authority. The response was swift. Within days, an outside review was initiated. No HOA announcements were made. No warnings were issued. The mailbox area remained unchanged, but the atmosphere shifted. The enforcers who once appeared confident now seemed uneasy. Signage stopped updating. Emails paused mid-thread. Residents felt it before they understood it. Something was coming. The homeowner sensed it too. The pressure that once felt crushing now felt fragile, as if one well-placed push could collapse the entire structure. The system that relied on silence and confusion was about to face scrutiny it couldn't control. The climax arrived without sirens, shouting, or dramatic announcements, which made it even more devastating. It unfolded on an ordinary weekday morning, the kind Willow Creek Estates had always relied on to keep life predictable. But beneath the calm surface, every pressure point the HOA had been abusing for months finally collided at once. The mailbox area was the first sign that something was different. Residents noticed unfamiliar vehicles parked along the curb, positioned carefully, deliberately. Not neighbors. Not delivery trucks. The temporary structures near the mailbox, once treated as unquestionable authority, suddenly looked flimsy and out of place. The signs that had dictated behavior for weeks now felt exposed, almost embarrassing, as if they were props waiting to be dismantled. Word spread quickly, though no one said anything out loud. Doors opened. Curtains shifted. People lingered longer than usual near their windows. The same neighbors who once avoided eye contact were now watching closely, sensing that the balance of power had shifted. The HOA's response was immediate and panicked. A last-minute email hit inboxes with an urgent subject line about unauthorized external interference. It warned residents not to engage, not to cooperate, not to assume wrongdoing. The message tried to reclaim authority through language alone, but it landed flat. For the first time, the HOA sounded defensive instead of commanding. The homeowner at the center of it all didn't feel triumphant yet. The weight of the past months still pressed heavily on him. The fines. The threats. The silent fear of making one wrong move. Standing back now, watching the process he had set in motion unfold, felt surreal. This wasn't revenge fueled by anger, it was accountability arriving on schedule. The inspection began methodically. Every modification to the mailbox area was documented. Every unapproved structure was measured, photographed, and logged. The authority overseeing the review didn't rush. They didn't argue. They didn't negotiate. They simply observed, compared, and confirmed what the documentation already proved. And with each confirmation, the HOA's narrative collapsed further. What had been framed as community management was now clearly visible as unauthorized control. What had been described as security measures was reclassified as interference. The vague language that once intimidated residents was stripped of its power under clear regulations that didn't bend to intimidation or local politics. The turning point came when responsibility was assigned. Not abstract responsibility. Not collective responsibility. Specific names. Specific actions. Specific consequences. The individual who had positioned herself as the gatekeeper of the neighborhood was no longer a protector or enforcer. She was the focal point of the investigation. Her proximity to the mailbox, once her advantage, now worked against her. Her self-appointed authority unraveled under scrutiny that didn't care about HOA titles or neighborhood reputation. The HOA board, previously silent or complicit, was pulled into the spotlight next. Records were requested. Approvals were questioned. Communications were reviewed. The absence of proper authorization was impossible to ignore. Attempts to distance themselves only highlighted how long they had allowed the situation to continue unchecked. Residents watched the unraveling in real time. What made the moment so powerful wasn't loud confrontation, it was exposure. The fear that had kept everyone compliant evaporated as clarity replaced confusion. The system that thrived on ambiguity couldn't survive transparency. The mailbox itself became symbolic. What had once represented control, delay, and anxiety was now the physical evidence of overreach. The same place that caused residents to hesitate now drew them closer. People gathered nearby, not to intervene, but to witness. For months, they had felt powerless. Now they were watching power being corrected. The homeowner felt something unexpected settle in: relief. Not excitement. Not celebration. Relief that the burden he carried wasn't imaginary. That the frustration wasn't personal failure. That the rules hadn't changed, only their misuse had. The validation was quiet but overwhelming. By the end of the inspection, nothing remained uncertain. The unauthorized structures were marked for removal. The imposed schedules were nullified. The fines tied to mailbox access were flagged as invalid. The HOA was instructed to cease enforcement immediately pending further review. It was a complete reversal. The authority that once dictated behavior now stood restrained, exposed, and accountable. The antagonist who once watched the neighborhood from a position of confidence now faced the consequences of acting without limits, without consent, and without legal ground. But the most impactful moment came not from any official action. It came from the neighborhood itself. Residents approached the mailbox openly for the first time in weeks. No hesitation. No scanning for approval. No fear of notices or penalties. One by one, they reclaimed a routine that had been quietly stolen from them. The mailbox doors opened freely. And in that moment, the HOA's power play didn't just fail, it ended. The structures that enforced silence were gone. The rules that thrived on intimidation were dismantled. The illusion of authority collapsed under the weight of scrutiny it never expected to face. As the outside vehicles pulled away and the street returned to stillness, the homeowner understood something crucial. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment everything finally changed, and the consequences were only just beginning. After the dramatic confrontation and the federal inspection, Willow Creek Estate slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. But it was a different kind of quiet now, one that carried the weight of lessons learned in the subtle hum of restored order. The mailbox, once a symbol of control and intimidation, had been returned to its original purpose. Residents opened it without hesitation, retrieved their packages without fear, and began to realize just how fragile the illusion of power had been. For the homeowner who had endured months of harassment, the resolution brought a mix of relief, reflection, and a quiet pride. What had begun as a personal frustration, the stolen mail, the fines, the manipulations, had transformed into a fight for clarity, fairness, and respect. Each document he had meticulously collected, every note he had saved, and every bylaw he had studied had culminated in this victory. It wasn't just about proving the HOA wrong, it was about reclaiming a sense of normalcy that had been taken without justification.